Hello and welcome to the attention mechanism. It might be the dog days of summer for almost every other industry, but not this podcast, which is why we are joined this week, as we are every week, by the one, the only, Andrew May.
Hello, Justin.
We've got so much to go over.
You went over the stories before. Let's do this. I'm like, wow, that we forgot. Like,
I said, okay, so we have Opus 5, we have the open source letter, we have the 10 gigawatt data center that apparently NVIDIA is willing to backstop up to $500 billion worth of build out for. And totally skipped over the fact that OpenAI had a model in a benchmark, escape the sandbox, hack Hugging Face and OpenAI getting along in the way that friends that ask for $100 million get along, which is what the Hugging Face CEO did publicly on Twitter last night. So I guess let's start there. What do you make of all this? When you see this news break, what are the first thoughts that come to your head?
Not terribly surprised. So just quick context. They were testing, they said there are two models involved, 5.6 and an unnamed internal model. And when they ran the test, they said that they had them. Normally when you do stuff, when you're hitting the API, there's things called safety classifiers, which look to see, like, is this trying to exploit or do this sort of stuff? They're doing an internal test, so it's considered a higher trust environment. So apparently those weren't put in place. So it wasn't like, oh, this thing would have run amok if you'd been running this in Codex. It was literally, in this particular environment, they tested it like this without the classifiers in place. So what happens? Intelligence it's a difficult thing to measure in humans, and it's equally difficult to measure in models. There's how much knowledge something has, like just like, I know this off the top of my head, like Jeopardy knowledge. Then there's like really clever problem solving knowledge. A rat may be terrible at Jeopardy, but it might be really good at figuring out how to get out of something or do something, or an octopus or a raven or something like this. Some people are very knowledgeable. Some people, we call it street smarts, clever, whatever. And this applies to models too. There's another thing, which is how long they will work at a problem and try novel solutions. That's another thing, is that, any of you remember earlier on asking, ChatGPT to do something, to give it 3 chances, and they keep giving the same answers. Now models know to keep trying it differently and to keep at it going longer. And that's one of the metrics they use is, they'll talk about an AI worked for 100 hours trying to solve for a thing. So here you have a model that is very tenacious, extremely tenacious, and it was given a problem. The problem was there's a thing called exploit bench, which is basically, can you find exploits? And there's a answer key, and hypothetically there's a kid in a classroom and they're like, here's the test, try to ace the test. They didn't say you can't cheat. They didn't say you can't leave the classroom. Mm-hmm. So the kid went down the hall, into the secure area, picked the lock, went into a filing cabinet and found the answer key and went back and said, look, I got 100%. And you're like, well, that was the solution. And it just so happens that, to do this, it's not a kid, it's a model. And it went in and it hacked Hugging Face using some very clever exploits. I
People
think
that don't know, just what is Hugging Face? Because
Hugging Face is a company.
Repeated.
They provide open source. They have resources for open source software. You can store models there. You can download it. So it's considered like a repository. As New York Times calls it, online library for basically, if you run, let's say if I want to test models, they'll have different models I can download and play with. That kind of thing. They have data and all kinds of data sets and stuff.
So I got a bunch of friends in the InfoSec community. I'll be at DEF CON next week. It's very interesting interplay between my AI online world and my InfoSec online world, because the InfoSec online world, I think, had some lessons that are very interesting to be taken out of this, and I think are well remembered, and others that were really dumb because they don't really know a lot about the AI world. The one thing that's very, very dumb is the idea that this in any way would be an intentional stunt to bring attention to OpenAI or the AI world, or for any reason that you would invent for that to happen. I think that that's an incredibly stupid take. There's no world in the AI field that this kind of attention is what they want. At least OpenAI. OpenAI does not want this attention.
No,
yeah,
it's a midwit take, because then you got to start saying, okay, so is Hugging Face in on it?
Yeah.
Then you're saying that this group that has their own reputation, which is sometimes not in alignment with OpenAI, is like, oh yeah, we talk about this before. When you don't understand the players or even the industry or things like this, you come up with kind of really midwit takes and stuff. And it's like, it's serious. It's not like safety people are, oh, this is so awesome. They're like, this is concerning. And it's
yes.
I think that there's already the solution for this kind of thing is already pretty well in play with the way that you're supposed to do classifiers. The reason this happened is because the internal way it was done.
Yes.
But yeah, it's whatever you think the marketing value of it would be. It's not worth, I don't know, $1 billion lawsuit and everything else like this. Like, it's just, I always ask people like, well, what in this situation? What about, it's like flat earthers. Like, okay, what if you go to the edge of the ocean? What do you say? Oh, you can't. What do you this? And you just realize, oh, they never think about this. And it's like, so anyhow.
So the other side of it that I do think is interesting, I do think brings us a little bit closer to where the things that we should bring from an event like this is that, well, no matter what, in a properly set up system, the model should not have been able to get to the open internet and blah, 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 blah. And like you said, safety classifiers that were turned off because it was an internal thing. I think it is safe to say that there was not an expectation with this model for there to be that level of capability, and there will probably be different standards that go into benchmarks like this going forward, especially, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm a benchmark expert, but obviously there's been a lot of reporting that has gone into this particular one. But Exploit Gym is a benchmark about finding vulnerabilities, shutting down systems, and rebooting them so you can get things that you are not supposed to get. And also, apparently there are several of the tests that are unsolvable. So you are incentivizing cheating to find that they are unsolvable. That's the correct answer is this is unsolvable to that particular challenge. So there's a lot that kind of goes into this here. I do think that it is a milestone for this field, that you should be, looking at these things differently from a safety perspective. It obviously has a lot of reverberations to the safety community. If I were to say that there's anything that OpenAI would want to do is because of internal politics amongst safety researchers, OpenAI probably had a vested interest in being ahead of this as much as they could and being as forward and transparent as they can be. But it is not I don't know. Let me ask you this. The idea that this shows misalignment. What do you think of that argument?
I'm not worried about what's going on behind the scenes with OpenAI, Anthropic, or Google when they test these things. Something like this happened while they're internally testing it. It's like, again, I don't want to minimize what happened, but it's like it's not like a bunch of hospital patient records released or anything like this, whatever. And again, you're Hugging Face, it's frustrating, and it's also but I'm saying, like, as you every time you put out a tool, a new library, a new tool or whatever, a hacking tool or something like this, somebody's going to use it in a way that's not ideal. And you're really hard to put that genie back in the bottle. Here, we had a thing, which is not a good thing to happen, but I'm saying is it was understood, documented, contained in a way that you could understand what's going on. We can look at how this thing happened. It was very clear, like, oh, this is why we need classifiers when you're using this stuff out there. I would say that, I think that it's we know that things are going to happen on the road to improving these systems more and more and more. The thing the challenging thing, though, about alignment was, you would say, within the industry is that, Hugging Face says, hey, first thing we try to do is ask Claude if Claude could tell us what was going on, and Claude refused because it said it's cybersecurity risk. They may have tried an OpenAI model. I'm not sure if they did. It just got past me. But anyhow, that's an issue, is that you're trying to solve for this. And they're a legit company that should have access to these kinds of tools to be able to do this. Regardless of where you stand on open source, we're going to be in a world where increasingly capable models, a model that did this last week, whether it's a week from now or a year from now, there will be an open source version of this, or somebody will take a open source model and train it up to have this kind of capability. You want to make sure that companies like Hugging Face, et cetera, have the ability to defend against these attacks. And that was one of the problems they had, was those tools weren't available. Since then, they've now become brought into OpenAI's cyber defense program to have early access to stuff and to be able to do that. And I think that's super critical. That was frustrating. And I think that ideally they should have been part of it sooner. And that was my criticism of Anthropic, was when Anthropic first announced Mythos, was they, basically the only people that had access were companies with $100 billion market cap or more. And I think that, there's an opportunity to say, hey, again, you're worried about revealing secrets. Part of the problem is trust. That's part of the problem, though, is there's a trust issue, is that once you put it out there, it will end up elsewhere. There are Chinese models that have capabilities, and people are like, oh, I don't believe it because it was only out for a week. Like, well, it had early access elsewhere, and we know that got leaked. And so, it's not as clean cut as we have. So I think at the very minimum, I think it's really, we have to think about expanding this kind of access to these sorts of systems for trusted actors. There's ways that, there's tiers of trust that you go through to be able to know who has access to it. And, you can give access for cybersecurity to a company and say, listen, all this will be logged in case there's misalignment, whatever, and whatnot. So I think the next step forward is a lot more industry alignment.
What you're saying is the only way to stop a bad guy with a frontier model is a good guy with a frontier model.
Well, yeah, that's always been the case. I mean, I've been making that argument for years. My concern with AI is less about cybersecurity and more about weapons and stuff, because I think cybersecurity is this crazy wild frontier, but a lot of it is not all of it's resolvable, but a lot of it is just, okay, use the backup, use this. But that's not true of everything. But I would just say that catastrophic is like, I don't want another Wuhan incident, because somebody figured out, a faster way to gain a function digitally and decided to just, run an auto assembly tool to do that.
Well, maybe they'll write about it in their diary.
Oh my God.
That's another podcast. We can have another conversation on another podcast. I am less swayed by the idea of this is a demonstration of misalignment. And I think philosophically, I'm just not I look at these more like tools than I do people. And I don't believe that this is a sign of like emerging delinquent behavior. I think that this is an example of a very specific test that the model succeeded at passing the test on in a less than ideal sandbox that is going to inform how internal security on this kind of stuff that, is going forward. So it is very interesting. And I will also say this. I hope both Hugging Face and OpenAI continue to be upfront with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
There's apparently more information coming, and I'm excited to see it. I think that this is a field that's moving fast, and I don't think anybody would say that otherwise, that these things are not moving at a hugely accelerated pace. So the lessons we can learn are going to be invaluable, not only for OpenAI, not only for Hugging Face, but for the entire industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the thing that's always sort of hard to tell in rooms is you need small incidents along the way to help you understand what you need to do. And I would say, bringing up though the whole biology and, pathogen research, part of the problem we had by the time that COVID happened was and following the news, the lab leak seems like even Fauci thought it was probably that, or at least didn't think the wet market hypothesis had the credibility. But anyway, point is, there was a lot of that stuff led up to that where people didn't know. Like even post, the post leak, Taiwanese researchers working on it, they had a leak, and this is public knowledge. They admitted it, but it didn't get kind of the attention it did. And there's a whole history of these things breaking containment that people don't understand or know about, which is part of the problem, I think, led to a situation where we got to where we did with biosafety, where I don't really feel safe with the people in charge because they seem much more eager to close ranks and to protect their own, which now the data shows that. And I think that for AI safety, I would say that as frustrated as somebody who's the OpenAI alumni and hosts their podcast to see blasted over the news, people need to be talking about this, and people need to know what the state of these things are, And I think in a real way, I think my frustration in Anthropic was generating these scary stories for motivations as of which we still weren't quite sure what the motivation was.
Let's get into something that involves that. You mentioned open source models. That was something that Hugging Face had to deploy. I believe it was GLM in investigating their hack. Which, by the way, they said it was a very interesting day because their cybersecurity team was investigating this breach. And they're like, well, this is very weird because somebody breached our system and then didn't go for anything that would make them money. They were just like in like very weird parts of their website that eventually led them to putting 2 and 2 together along with OpenAI. That being said, GLM is an open source model. You've had Kimmy come out. That a lot of conversation, both from the federal government's perspective about the idea that some of these open source models, according to people in the government, seem to be distilled from frontier models, including Anthropic's Fable. Anthropic has said as much that Chinese companies are distilling their models, and yet there is a movement now that has an open letter that's been signed by, I believe, everybody that is everybody in the world of AI except for Anthropic, calling for a world in which open models should be part of the ecosystem. This was led by NVIDIA, who obviously have a vested interest in as many people running as many models as possible because they're in the chip moving business. But Anthropic hasn't signed. I guess my first question is, do you believe that the letter is intellectually in the right place? And do you believe that Anthropic will sign?
I don't know what signing really means. And because it kind of comes down to like, hey, we believe in have robust access to open source models, whatever. The question is going to come down to accountability at some point when you get into things that are like, much more capable and have other risks for there. We'll sort of see where the rubber hits the road and how people feel about where they do. Like, it's like the libertarian argument, like guns, cool, bombs, maybe, uranium, nuclear, where do you sort of say, okay, maybe government can intervene here? And that's the thing.
I think I saw all that on a t-shirt at Freedom Fest. Guns, cool, bombs,
Yeah, but it's a real thing. And I when I talk to some of my friends in that community, I get a little frustrated because one, they will believe a thing that conforms to what they do. Like, we talked to somebody who said, it turns out that, Mythos, the Chinese models are already as good as Mythos. I'm like, that's not true. That's just objectively not true. The real
that's fake.
What's that? Yeah, the real because they said, hey, this big hack, other model said hack too. Like, yeah. But it can, there's a metric by which doing other exploit stuff that Mythos and 5.6 are incredibly good at that Chinese models can't. Chinese models are still probably 6-7 months behind. And that can close. And it's like I've said, distillation helps a lot. But it's not only distillation. IP theft helps a lot. But it's not only IP theft. They're really smart people in China building stuff, Mm-hmm. And if I take one of those things away, if I take the first two away, I can't count on the idea that like, well, they're just never going to figure it out. I was frustrated because, the effective altruism or the pause argument had been because the problem is you could always sort of trump that argument with like China. Great. We pause all American ILF. What about China? And then that's why they were very big into the export controls on GPUs.
The chips.
And and my argument had been like the problem with that is in 1940s, 1950s, the United States had even then a compute advantage over Russia, and we knew things about refinement and stuff, and we knew how to build a thermonuclear bomb, and they didn't. And we're like, well, great, we're going to have nuclear supremacy. That'll be our century, whatever. And Russia's like, well, thermonuclear is great because they weigh less, but what if we can just build a bigger rocket? And Russia ended up building an entirely new category of rockets that were incredibly heavy lift, and up until the 90s, dominated space launch. And by us saying, well, this is the one that matters because we want it to be, doesn't mean that they have to play by that rule. And I'd say that's the thing with China. And I remember it was Helen Toner, I think is very sincere. I remember her saying, look, these H100 restrictions have really helped, because that was their argument. This is how we'll stop China, whatever. And then we can, and it was like, because they wanted to be able to slow down the United States to say, listen, we should slow this down, whatever. We know how to control China through H100. It's like, and it worked, And so I think that we're in a situation now where we have to acknowledge a world where everybody's going to move as quickly as they can. The difference you can make is how well coordinated you are and how well you get along with responsible actors. It's now a matter of, it's not how fast you're going to move, it's how well you're going to coordinate and prevent the bad outcomes. So when it comes to the open source thing, the goal there is that you want to create a vibrant ecosystem. A lot of companies can build if their business model always involves sending money to OpenAI or Anthropic, it's going to be a limiter there, and it puts too much control into those companies from that point of view. And so you want to have a vibrant system, and you want to keep pushing them forward. It's just finding that balance between part of it's like who has the accountability for it. But will Anthropic sign it? I don't know. I mean, again, my crit of them is. And OpenAI, I think, again, as the host of OpenAI podcast says to producer of OpenAI podcast, OpenAI gets this rap of like, they should be closed AI, said a famous, sometimes trillionaire who has done less for open source AI than just about anybody else at the company that size other than Anthropic. OpenAI has released, things people know, GPTOSS Safeguard, which is a model designed for helping you do safety safeguard and be able to gate and classify things. They released an entire system for doing redacting personal information. So if you're working in data sets, you don't want to accidentally expose people's data, like just happened with an Anthropic, by the way, thing where realized it was very easy to just start typing in URLs and get Anthropic. And granted, these were public conversations. And so people click the button to make it freely available, but API keys and stuff are there. And I'm like, would be great for Anthropic to be contributing things to the open source ecosystem to help redact data, do some of the same stuff. OpenAI released the Whisper model for voice transcription, which is incredibly state of art. There's no safety risk there. There's like zero. It's literally, it transcribes speech into text. It's a net boon to humanity. And that's why OpenAI open sourced it. They said, this is great. It's really not a lot of safety risk here. Maybe it gets a word wrong and somebody goes, oh my God, but we know what transcription is. They haven't done any of that. So do I see them signing it with any intent to do anything? No.
I mean, the answer to that is no. Mostly because it's a pedantic point that they're going to fight on. And that's what they do all the time. Like they've drawn lines in the sand on bigger, more consequential issues than whether or not they're going to sign the open source letter. And I don't know whether or not they have the internal turmoil to make that change. I think that they are aligned on the idea that they see the landscape is one in which chaos equals danger, and there needs to be control. And control needs to be applied from the frontier, which is why they need to win.
He just
released my read of it.
Yeah, he just released a statement today, Dario Amodei, about this. And he's making what we've never advocated for a ban on open weight models. It's like, well, I mean, he brings up his number one concern is the risk that authoritarian governments, not solely CCP, but that having it misused for cyber and biological attacks. I think those are real concerns. I think those are very real concerns, and I will defend Anthropic from the point of view that if you are following this curve long enough, the models do get more and more capable. And like I said, what a model without a classifier did last week, when that's an open source model a year from now or 2 years from now, and you look at we've seen this before when somebody comes up with some hacking kit, We had this whole thing of like hospitals records and all this sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff out there, public utility stuff, things like this, government stuff. There's no money or no people to even bother running stuff to protect it or secure it. It's not there. And I'm not making an argument for or against. I'm just saying the reality is there's a lot of really, really, really poorly written unsecured code that nobody's minding right now. And then you get into the bio stuff. Like I do think that I can, because like people are like, I'm like, sit down with me and one of my friends at one of the big AI biology research labs, and we'll tell you scary scenarios that we won't publicly say because we don't want to put ideas out there. Yeah. But if you know kind of stuff, and not to say I'm going to give you a boogeyman story to say therefore no open source. That's not my. I just say you have to be realistic about that, and that's my frustration because I will talk to people who will go, it's overblown. I'm like, no, that isn't. You bioweapons are real. Exploits are real. Stuxnet was a real thing that did a good thing and then caused havoc elsewhere. These things, you can build these things, and you can sign to say, I'm fine with it. We need to be built faster, stronger, better. I'm like, that's cool. I'm not going to argue against you. But if you're like, it's overblown, maybe today, but not tomorrow.
Let's stay on Anthropic. They had a model release, Opus 5, yes. Released last week. The promise was that it would be Fable close in its power, but cheaper than what Fable cost because, and this was, I think, part of the reason why they wanted to make a big deal about this is because, as this is a moving target, the frontier is advancing very, very quickly. If Fable's not in your top subscription tier and you are using it for API only, then you need something that is frontier in your subscription class, or else people aren't going to pay the subscription fee. Opus 5 is there. Have you used it? And what do you think of the reaction?
I have not played it. Reaction's been great. It looks like a couple things to keep in mind is it's a more efficient than Fable in a lot of ways. I've heard some people criticize and how it works and whatever and saying they're going back to 5.6 Sol, but I've seen other people who love it and have done some great demos with it. I would say that, it's an example of like OpenAI and Anthropic, different strategy. OpenAI says, hey, we think we can get the same amount of performance out of less compute. And Anthropic's like, we're going to use this compute and get this much performance out of it, which is an interesting story because they say it's cheaper, but it actually still is like twice as expensive as 5.6 Sol because of the amount of tokens it uses, et cetera. But reports on it seem to be very good. Also should show Anthropic has a very good pipeline for training models. We had Mythos, then we had Fable. And after Fable, then Fable, we were talking about what happens when Fable goes away. We're like, well, they're going to have something come out there. And the rate at which they were going to turn around this Opus model was very quick, very fast. So very encouraging. Now, they're not messing around like OpenAI did with right now, OpenAI has Sol, they have Terra and Luna, which are the different model sizes. Because it turns out that OpenAI's Luna model can do a lot of great stuff. And some of these things, these bigger models do by just doing longer, but on cheaper tokens. Anthropic's not messing around with that right now. Maybe later on. Wouldn't surprise if they came out with at least some super cheap model that's really good at doing certain kinds of tasks. But, I think they know how to train models. They know how to train good models. Like that's just no other way around it. They're known for not trying really exotic stuff. They stick to basics. They focus on, pre-training, focus on the quality data they train, try to do it really efficiently well. The data set, I think they're very good at this stuff and they're getting more compute. And that's the thing that's going to kind of come down to it is part of it is if you're Google, it's a different situation. You're literally dealing with, a situation where you have, a management problem, where it's not all the compute in the world's not going to help you versus OpenAI and Anthropic, who have very clear ideas what they want to do with the compute. And I think the Anthropic is doing a really good job when it comes to training, doing that.
We had one release from OpenAI last week, and that was putting voice into codecs, something that they put a lot of attention into, and very much a Sam hinting, I really love this voice model so much. It's something that requires a new compute, which I wonder whether or not that is a ask for which he is excited to answer at some point later this year. Have you played with that in Codex, the new voice model in Codex?
No, not much. I've never been too conversational. I played it very briefly, seemed good, and then I was kind of went back to my own way of working. Other people love and rave about it, and kind of what makes this unique is they're using what's called a voice in, voice out model, which is basically instead of everybody else, including Anthropic, what they're doing is you speak, it transcribes it into text, sends that text to the model sees the text and responds and does this. This is all inside of there, and it's much more responsive and nuanced. I did see it was very good at listening to. I've done a few conversations with it. It's been pretty good, but it's not my daily driver.
Yeah, I got a little spooked in the usage. My usage number was going down a little faster than I thought, but I will say I had just left it on. I think it is designed. That model is designed to just be there. And to be quiet when you tell it to be quiet, and to talk to it when you are going to talk to it. And the progress they've made on that compared to the last voice model is pretty out of this world. Like it is, at least for me, if you're just sitting at your desk and you leave it open, you don't need a lot of instruction for it to just kind of be the always there companion. And I was doing stuff like texting you, and it was just going into my messages and texting Andrew, and it has good enough transcription that all the words that I was saying were the words I wanted sent, and it was sending it. Computer use plus voice plus connectors plus these current models is a pretty killer combination. You can begin to see the future when you roll all these things together. And I do think that that's why, so many months ago when they decided to kill Sora and we heard about the super app and that the Codex app was the future. They were putting all their eggs in that basket. You can understand what they were looking at now as this tech was internal to them and they were, building it up and polishing it up for public release. But while I still got notes on the ChatGPT app, there are some things that I still don't quite understand the difference in certain things. And I will say, while I have migrated all of my browsing life over to Chrome, it's just not the same as Atlas. No. The official ChatGPT sidebar plugin does not move as fast as Atlas does. That is frustrating. That being said, it's made me lean more on Codex workflows, and the Codex workflows have kind of largely replaced what I was doing daily driver wise with Atlas. So I will come out with a wash at least for now.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say this as the guy whose job originally was to explain all this stuff to people, that I sit here and literally we have a team of people who go out and train people how to do it. I'm like, why do I have a ChatGPT and a Codex tab which show me the same things in the sidebar? Don't know. What does ChatGPT do versus Work do? Why would I use one and not the other? Don't know. I don't know. I don't know why, should I ask Work to go through my email? Because ChatGPT seems to be able to do it, but when it can't do it, whatever. The pure capability is insane. The raw capability is absolutely insane. I went on this trip. I had one computer running back home, and I was sharing new stuff I was doing, from having to run Blender and do all this crazy stuff to building apps and stuff. The amount of stuff it's easier, I'd say, to use it actually on my phone, to be honest with you, than it is on my desktop.
Yeah. I mean, I was editing video. I was editing multiple different videos that I had generated from Codex via voice notes as if I were just directing an editor. And I was making the most asinine, ridiculous asks over and over and over again. I was talking to our friend Brian today, and he had, mentioned like, I told Codex to do this big thing, and it was a big long ask, and it wound up confusing a thing that I was saying, and so it did a bunch of this stuff wrong. And I was like, oh, then what'd you do? He's like, well, I told it to do it right, and it did it right. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like the thing that you need to reframe is like, that's not the fail that it would be if you had hired a contractor or you had told an employee to do a thing. Like now it's just like a part of the process because this process goes so insanely fast.
When I made for fun like a book trailer in Blender and I'm like, oh, go get audio, make it echoey. Now this right. It was exactly like that. And I did this sitting on a plane and I ended up with something that was amazing that like I would actually use, not doing video, but actually having it generated stuff in there. And that really, it made me think about like how much faster this was. And it's funny because I'm aware of how long it takes to get a thing done. But I'm like, oh, if I was developing with somebody else, one is the environment it created would have taken like a day or two to build, a person to build. And everything else like was just, it's neat to see people push it and stuff. Like, I think the video game demos that people are doing are cool, but I'm kind of like, I like it when people are just trying it really into different boundaries and stuff. And been amazing. Absolutely amazing.
10 gigawatt data centers going to get built in Ohio. This is something that's going to require the agreement of the federal government because they own a part of the infrastructure. And it looks like OpenAI is going to get it along with the guarantee of NVIDIA for more money than God. I mean, I don't know where we're even going to put the number here. So there's two factors here. Number one, the idea that we're just talking about a 10 gigawatt data center is just a like insane concept, considering that a year ago we were talking about like, that was like the entire capacity that the company was looking to deal with. Now they're looking to leapfrog that in one facility. But the second is, I want to stop back into a neighborhood we haven't been in a while, man. Skeptic Corner. So there's two sides of Skeptic Corner. There's I think the more quiet portion of it is we've hit a wall. These capabilities are not really all that impressive. And there hasn't been a lot there. This has been a pretty bad summer for the actually LLMs aren't powerful crowd. But piping up, especially today, when you see gigantic numbers between a deal with NVIDIA and OpenAI, a lot of this is round trip accounting. This isn't real money. This is fraudulent deals. This is propping up the entire economy on a bubble, on an accounting bubble. What do we say to that?
Keep it up, guys. The memory, there was today memory prices, the memory stocks got shorted because a Chinese memory company had a huge, IPO, whatever. And we're like, and I'm like, oh, cool. This is what I've been waiting for to buy memory stocks right now. There's some companies I like. It's great. People will shut up for the most part about capabilities because it's clear these models are incredibly capable. And that was my thing that I would say 2 years ago. I'm like, give me your thing that you don't think it could do. And you win a Nobel Prize. One, you got to be a human to do that. Okay. Give me win an Emmy. Like, again, you talk about human stuff. Give me a specific, measurable, objective task, knowledge task done on the computer that you don't think it can do. And you won't get that. You literally, people just, they don't want to suggest those things now because, all right. And I can name
there was a viral part of an essay from a few years ago from a writer who we will not name, but rhymes with Schmary Schmarkus, where they were listing like, hey, like if LLMs can do 3 of these 6 things, then AGI will have been reached, and it has done like very capably all 6 at this point. Now that does not stop that person from, doesn't stop that mule from braying. But still, it is interesting to look back at those takes.
And I know what they're bad at. I mean, I could tell you, like, I understand. I know under certain long horizon tasks, if people don't realize this are there, and I get it. And sometimes labs don't even pay attention to that. I know what they're bad at, and I know how and even also there are ways to get it. But also, there's things they haven't been optimized for. So, the people who are a lot of the ones who are shifting from they're not good to like, well, they're good, and we heard it's writing terrible code. Well, now we know it's writing good code, but it's going to create risks or whatever. But a lot of them are trying to shift like, oh, we're overspending. The thing that I explain, I say this is like, one, we'll talk about the economics in a second. Let's talk about usage. Height of the stock market bubble. You have to say, well, there was a price in public market valuations bubble where people were saying these companies are worth way more than they ever could earn. Did that mean the internet as a technology had a bubble? Well, no. Number of people logging on was increasing dramatically. The number of people putting their credit cards online was increasing. Number of people spending money was going up. All those trend lines were in the right direction, okay? The question was, were all the early bets and companies trying to IPO, did they make sense? No, they didn't. And a number of them failed, some succeeded. Other people bring up, well, we built all this fiber, that was infra. We spent all this money in infra. I was just in a call earlier today with some investment advisors. Like I said, here's the thing about fiber. Fiber can't use fiber. When we went from an API call being made by me to I have 3 systems running around me making API calls right now. Okay. Amount of tokens I'm consuming. I'm using billions of tokens. I did the math on how much it would have cost 6 years ago, but it's insane. So I'm running multiple things right now, trying things, running things, etc. My wife, I had to upgrade her to a pro account because she was running out of tokens and she's not a coder. She's building stuff for her work. She's building stuff for stuff. She's building these applications that are very useful for her. And that's the wave of the future. Only 2.2% of the population even pays for like a ChatGPT or cloud account. Businesses are starting to use it more, but it's still nowhere near there. When you talk about revenues, every time you and I go to the OpenAI office, there is a area there where they're training people who are salespeople, whatever, and it's filled. It is filled. And the numbers between OpenAI and Anthropic, like the run rates just keep going over. Like the money going into them is insane. And we hear the skeptics. It's like, okay, what did you think it would be last year? What was your number for actual amount of revenue these companies would be making? And none of them even guessed close to this. So you're like, okay, you've been wrong every single year. And like Guy, you mentioned, there's another one, rhymes with Citron, who is, another one of these. And I'm like, what prediction of yours in hard numbers about revenue, don't get into profits. It's like, if you could say, well, they need to be profitable. Like that's not their plan right now. Amazon's profit plan was not to be profitable in the 1990s. It was profitable at some point after they built out their data centers and stuff. Their goal that they're trying to do is scale. So if you think that are you arguing that there's not enough demand? What do you think? And I would say that consistently they're always wrong about that. Demand is shown by revenue is through the roof. The fact that these companies are raking in a combined like nearly $90 billion or $100 billion a year is phenomenal. And none of the skeptics predicted that. And I'm like, if they've been wrong for the last 6 years, why do you think
one of the CEOs of the Frontier Labs predicted that they didn't need as much data as they as their competitor was doing in Anthropic.
Yeah, Dario at the beginning of the year, if they're wrong about the compute they need, they're going to look stupid. And now Dario is scrambling to buy as much compute as he has because he underestimated the demand, vastly underestimated the demand. And guess what? When you look at the projections for who is going to own the future of compute, he does not like where he looks right now because he didn't have the conviction. And now OpenAI getting a 10 gigawatt data center. And I will tell you, there's more. There's a lot more going on because, if you've seen it and you understand it, you get it. If you're in 1995 and you're like, one of the most prescient people I thought talking about the internet in the 90s was David Bowie. You ever see the David Bowie interview and he's talking to the skeptical journalist, he's like, oh no, it's going to be everything. And like, come on, what do you know? And like Bowie understood people and
yes. And he understood distribution channels. He was somebody who was involved in a lot of different stuff like that, where he understood hey, look, people want goods, they want services, they want things as fast as possible. They, we constantly continue to invent new ways to deliver things, and this is yet another new way to deliver things. There are people that I think are smart on various different issues that I think got a little too invested in calling out tech hype and are now kind of willfully blinding themselves to what is happening here. This is not random crypto coins. This is not NFTs. This is not the metaverse. This is not any different next big thing that captured the world's imagination. If you believe that there is not a massive data crunch, then tell me why Dario made a deal with Elon. Explain to me why that happened from both ends, for the record. From both ends, why did that happen? That happened because there was a tremendous data crunch. And, I'm going to go ahead and believe what Vinod Khosla said on the OpenAI podcast, that the number he cares about are API calls. When the API calls stall, then he'll look at things differently. Right now, it's on a rocket ship, and that has only continued to shoot up, especially the more that you get all these different autonomous agents that can spin up for more and more mundane tasks that are going to fold into our daily lives.
My new line is the API calls are coming from within the data center now, and that's significant. It's literally it's compute uses compute. The thing that happens is nobody gets the frontier, even me, you, people we know, Sam Altman, we're all trying to figure this thing out. The one thing you don't want to be is blind to stuff. And that's my criticism of a lot of people is they're like, all right, it's bad at this. Like, who do you talk to? Where do you go to see if you're wrong? And the ones that I think are the most stubborn just don't, I don't need to. I don't know. Like, it's the boomer skeptic sort of mentality of like, it's crap. I've seen it before. No, you have not. You've seen other patterns, but you've never seen anything before. And sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. But if you decided I've just said, like, these critics, I'm like, every year, if you ask them for concrete predictions, they don't want to make them now because they know they look like asses if they do that. So they'll get you vague stuff and whatever. I had a call today, talking to some wealth advisors, and they're asking about like, being too invested in AI. I said, here's the thing. It's like, it seems like every company's an AI company. Well, I said, AI is the word for software now. If you use software, you have to use AI. So everything becomes AI. And so I said, you have to differentiate within there what is different, because if you're just saying, if you're in the 80s, like, I don't know about these software companies, well, guess what? You were going to miss out on everything. But it doesn't mean that every software company was good. Obviously not. I just think that like I've been saying the same thing. You and I've talked about this thing for over half a decade. I'm like, it's clear. It's clear. We're not going, I think steam is still going to be more valuable than electric, and like, it's like, this electric thing is useful, but, after you've wired up Philadelphia, what's left?
I mean, if we look at New Year's Day to now, we're in late July. It's a different planet. We're on a different world. The Codex app wasn't out. Like, it was just we're in a crazy takeoff period right now. And it's only going to get even crazier because, as reported by multiple outlets, Sam Altman was at the White House theoretically to give a roadshow to GPT-6, so that can get greenlit for a release sooner rather than later, sometime in August. We would presume before Labor Day. Obviously there's another Fable class model that Anthropic is allegedly working on. All these harnesses are out there. It's, it is just a blow your hair back moment right now.
The race is on right now. We should take a moment to do this and talk about RSI. Okay. RSI is what we call recursive self-improvement. And that's the rate at which you basically create a system, an AI system is able to improve itself. One of the reasons Anthropic, when people were trying to use Fable to write AI code or to optimize models, it didn't refuse, it just sabotaged it. It sabotaged it, right? which caused a big problem that they thought people would be okay with. That was crazy. But their concern is these models are going to get better and better and better. And what OpenAI and Anthropic are racing towards right now is to build systems that you just let them run and they come up with the improvements and they train themselves and they continue to train. It's part of the reason why OpenAI is trying to get all this compute to be able to do this. What that means is instead of waiting for humans to figure out the next big paradigm, the model reaches this point where it continuously figures out how to improve and optimize and does that. That's predicted before the end of the year. Somebody's going to be running an RSI, basically recursive self-improving system that is going to just continuously get better. I think we're already seeing.
I would bet before Halloween. I don't know which prediction market that I would bet on, but I would bet before the costumes come out.
I think we're seeing forms of this now because we know that the tools that these labs are using internally are different than what's external. And I've heard rumors of what Anthropic uses, and we've seen the pace of what's been going on. And I think that the rate at which 5.5 came out was it April? When did a 5.5 come out? April 23rd. Okay. We got 5.6.
Oh yeah, because they had the 5.5 party on 5.5. Should have known that.
Yeah. 5.6 came out July 9th. So we had end of April, beginning of we had May and June. It was 2 full months.
And by the way, the rumor was 5.6 would have been here earlier if not for a wrong turn at Albuquerque when it came to the federal government.
Yeah, which is why 6 will probably happen closer to the release of 5.6, is because the 5.6 release got delayed because of that. Which maybe was by plan. Who knows? But anyhow, it was 9 weeks between that, and 5.5 to 5.6 is a significant jump. A lot of people think 5.6 could have been called a 6-level model, but OpenAI's like, no, trust us, that's not a GPT 6-level model. For those of us who use 5.6, it's phenomenal. It's incredible. It's like the biggest factor that bothers me is speed, which
apparently that's something will be coming soon. We had that was rumored to possibly be last week. Maybe it's this week. Maybe it's the week after. But
yeah, they said July. OpenAI had said Cerebrus. These models are available in Cerebrus, which what that means is that's like 10 times faster. It'll cost a lot more, but what a great place to be in.
That's it boggles the mind to think about. We talked a lot about takes. Let's go out on something that is not specifically AI related, but certainly is rooted in the world of tech takes. And that is our heartfelt condolences to everybody who was friends with and family of John C. Dvorak, one of the most legendary voices in tech punditry, PC Gamer, longtime columnist there, and PC Magazine, a longtime columnist there. Twit, No Agenda, so many different things. When I say John C. Dvorak take, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
I didn't know that he passed. I'm.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Just hearing this.
Heart attack last Monday. He apparently, according to his wife, was complaining about a plot hole in NCIS. Wow. The shooter went out shooting as is befitting somebody like John C. Dvorak. But it's just a tremendous loss for the world of tech punditry. I mean, he was a guy that when we talk about this kind of world of people predicting or making statements, he was somebody that was unafraid to do it and always did it with a kind of style that even if you disagreed with him, and I think nobody who read him for a long time didn't disagree with him at some point. You still liked the way he said it. Like there was a bit of a panache to it. He was a phenomenal opinion writer.
Yeah, he was amazing. What a legend. Wow.
Oh, well, sorry to drop that on you. R.I.P. John C. Dvorak.
Yeah.
But that'll wrap it up for us today. Mr. Andrew Main, where can people find you?
Go to helloaiproject.com and take a look. It's a thing Justin and I started with our friends over at Interdimensional. And we're offering free training, like legit free, no strings attached training for individuals and nonprofits that want to learn how to use AI. We've got an amazing trainer, Nick Soon, who's running this for us. Our goal is to help train 1 million people, and still room. If you want to go do it. We have classes on introduction to AI. We have, if you wanted how to use AI for back to school, if you've got a nonprofit and want to help train some of your staff, just reach out. helloaiproject.com. There's a schedule. Just click right there, book it, free, completely free. And we're just eager to help as many people as possible learn how to use AI.
Yeah. You want to know what? Head on over there. It's a great thing. And we love that people have gotten a lot of use out of it. Some of the stories we've heard from these training sessions have just been absolutely phenomenal and really, really heartwarming. If there's ever a time where you've listened, if you're listening to this show and it's because you've heard Andrew and I on other stuff, but AI is not necessarily your thing, but you just need to know more about it, do yourself a favor. And find the Hello AI class that makes the most sense in your life. And if you get something out of it, recommend it to somebody else. Because again, it is no strings attached, FREE.
And it may not be for you because you're probably pretty AI savvy if you listen to this. If you have a family member, we're doing classes for the senior citizens and other people. You know somebody else that you just say, hey, I'm curious, send them to Hello AI Project.
There we go. Till next time, for Andrew Main, I'm Justin Robert Young. We'll see you later.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.